Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our session this afternoon for the California Higher Education Collaborative Conference. We are delighted to be with you this afternoon. Actually, I was chatting with a colleague of mine yesterday, and we spoke at the first event back in, I think it was 2013. So this is our 9th year, although of course there was 1 year where we were COVID interrupted. But we've been speaking at this UC-CSU CCC event actually before it was all 3 universities. So it's a major part of our presentation agenda and list of every year, and we really enjoy attending these conferences and look forward to the discussion today. So as a brief introduction, my name's Phil Searle. I'm the CEO of Chuy Partners, and I will be introducing our presentation today. I'm joined by Chuy Michel, who's also part of Chuy Partners, and Janet Speer, who's very kindly agreed to join us from UC Berkeley to talk about her journey with RPA. Chuy and Janet will introduce themselves in a little bit more detail as we move through the deck today. So I'll be kicking it off now. So, okay, so you can run the slides, Chuy. Thank you. So what we're talking about today is we're focusing on RPA and higher education, basically. We're covering what RPA is in terms of its as a definition of how it fits into what we call the intelligent automation roadmap as part of the digitalization trend, or sometimes called the fourth industrial revolution. So we're going to talk a little about RPA and how it fits in. We're then going to be talking, asking Janet to present her case study on what they've done at University of California Berkeley and how they're leveraging RPA. So we'll be talking to that. And then Chuy will be giving some tips and tricks on how best to run an RPA program. So that's basically our agenda for today. Okay. All right, let's keep going, Chuy, please. So as I said, I'm Phil, and there's Chuy, Michel, and Janet Speer. So we'll get stuck in now.
Sure. So I'm Janet Speer. I'm the Director of Human Resources and Academic Personnel at the University of California, Berkeley. I work in the Vice Chancellor of Administration's office, and my areas of responsibility are basically in HR, a lot in the new hire and onboarding areas, and I do a bunch of other things: records management, first contact, telephony systems, and other HR technology. So that's me.
Thanks, Janet. And Chuy, while we're on the screen, go ahead.
Yeah, happy to be here. I'm Chuy Michel. I lead the RPA global practice for Chuy Partners. I've been doing this for the last couple of years. And before joining Chuy, I had the opportunity to run a number of automation programs for the last 6 years, including the setup of centers of excellence for large multinationals. I've been around shared services and IT delivery for over 20 years now. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Chuy. Okay, next slide. So a little bit of background on just a couple of slides on Chuy Partners. So as I said, I mentioned earlier on, I'm the CEO and founder of Chuy Partners. We founded the company in 2006. And effectively, we're focused on 3 main delivery areas: business transformation, including shared services and global business services; digital transformation, which includes technology enablement around systems, including ERP solutions and document scanning workflow and other technology enablers. And then finally, RPA, robotic process automation, which is the area that Chuy leads within the company, and the area we'll be focusing on today. Just a little bit more background: founded in 2006, so we have operations throughout the world. We focus mainly on back office, although actually more recently moved more into the mid office. So supporting support operations like finance, HR, recruitment, IT, call centers, workforce management, etc., and other functions. We are Chuy Difference practitioners. Originally, I was a former corporate controller at 3Com in the late 90s and early 2000s, and then a CFO before joining and setting up Chuy Partners in 2006. Next slide, please, Chuy. Okay, so what is robotic process automation? It's a term I'm sure you've heard a lot about, but just a few pointers on what it is and what it isn't. So the robot is a little bit confusing in the sense that it's actually not shiny robots like you see on some of those TV programs with fancy metal objects flying around. It is in RPA, in the sense of business process transformation, etc., is software. So RPA, robotic process automation, is automation software. It's not hardware. It's not shiny robots. Basically, RPA software is able to mimic or automate fully routine, standardized, consistent rules-based processes that otherwise a human would be doing themselves. So it's really about looking at routine, repetitive, standardized processes and taking those processes and asking a piece of software to run the steps as if they were a human doing the same processes or steps. That's really what RPA is. It mimics those processes. Bots, as a tool, interpret and trigger responses and actually can communicate with and between systems in order to provide a number of different tasks, ranging a number of different use cases, which we'll touch on a little bit later. And one of the great advantages of bots is they can transact in any IT application or website in just the same way as a user would with a user ID. So think of a user interface and a user sign-on. A bot is effectively doing the same thing. It's interacting with a system through an interface as if it were a human and then running specific steps click by click. And you basically train a robot to perform those steps very much in the same way as you would train a human to perform those same processes. But one of the good things about bots is they can operate 24/7 once you've trained them. Although, as Chuy will talk about a little bit later, bots can get sick to this. So you have to maintain and manage them as part of your own operation managed services. So that's what RPA is. Next slide, please, Chuy. Some of the other key concepts, I'm sure you've heard some of these descriptions: attended automation, unattended automation, etc. Attended automation is really about desktop automation, or sometimes called robotic desktop automation. It optimizes processes manual and requires interface with the user, with the agent, as you can see it here. And it's really about optimizing low value added manual processes at the same time as the user. So that's why I talk about desktop automation. Unattended automation is a little bit different and actually removes the need for the human to trigger or to start off a process. And this can drive significant value through orchestration and allows processes to be run speedily and can significantly reduce the cost of the back office and the efficiency of the back office by having this orchestrated bots running independent of a human actually having to trigger those bots. Actually, optical character recognition is an extension of unattended automation, at least in the traditional sense. Digitized RPA is the next step, where you have multiple bots orchestrated across multiple different processes, platforms, skills, interfaces, even user IDs. And chatbots are an example of this, where they basically require minimal human intervention and can operate across multiple channels and actually enable the user on the other end to operate self-service. And so digitized RPA is an extension of unattended automation. It's about multiple different systems and processes interacting together, accessing one piece of information, drawing up another to, for example, provide an answer to a question from the user through the chatbot. Machine learning is the next step beyond RPA. So it's less about the standardized, digitized, consistent robotic process and more about looking at ways of analyzing that data and making decisions based on algorithms from looking at the data patterns as you see here. So it's not programming, it's actually looking at data patterns, and RPA, it can provide the input feed into those data, into the data and the data patterns that machine learning can then draw conclusions from through the algorithm. An extension of this in the document management space is intelligent document processing, or sometimes called advanced OCR, advanced optical character recognition. Then we've got AI, artificial intelligence. AI is really the next step, which is basically a cognitive robot, if you want to look at it that way, that uses machine learning and statistical analysis and modeling to actually make decisions or aid decisions based on data, reports and analysis and machine learning tools. It really is about, as it says, providing some artificial intelligence to aid and actually carry out some decision-making processes. So artificial intelligence is an extension of machine learning, which is an extension of digitized RPA, which is an extension of desktop RPA. So these are some of the various concepts that you might hear. In its simplest form, RPA, as we've seen deployed thus far in many higher education institutions and in the private sector, have mainly been around attended automation and unattended automation, with definitely some digitized RPA. Machine learning is becoming more prevalent, but over the last few years, it's been mainly those first three. The opportunity is definitely to grow into 4 and 5 there. Okay, next slide, please, Chuy. Okay, so at this point, I'm actually going to hand over to Chuy. He's going to talk a little bit more about some of those process use cases and benefits that I mentioned and how we can use RPA to help us in the higher education and in general. So Chuy, take it from here, thanks.
Thank you, Phil. And I always try to remind myself that, you know, RPA is not a destination. We don't automate just for the sake of it. RPA and any given automation program, it's all about a journey, right? And a journey has to start from the very basics. And that's why we, when we work with clients and assist clients in the higher education system, we always try to bring forward key elements and basic elements on how to select a good automation. So not all the good ideas of processes that could be automated end up becoming a proper bot, a proper automation in production. So process work is very important. Diagnostic of your process, looking after within your portfolio of processes and administrative processes, which ones are highly manual, which ones are very repetitive. They need to have clear documented business rules, processes with low exceptions rates. So business rules clearly documented, and trying to look after opportunities where, you know, the exception rate is low, just so you can increase and maximize the processing capacity of the automation. Bots like electronic input. So bots work better with electronic data that comes in standard formats. High volumes, low complexity. This is another key element when evaluating opportunities for automation. You always want your both your processes and the systems to be mature and to be stable. So in a nutshell, the process work and the process assessment upfront before really jumping into any given automation becomes increasingly important. That's what at the end increases and maximizes the opportunity to have successful automations in production. There are many places, right, across all of our business processes, in the higher education system, in other industries. Human resources is one that it has become increasingly important in the higher education system. So when you think about this map, this may be a little bit confusing. I'm going to try to simplify it for you. The colors, what the colors really mean, when you see your dark blue, it's those areas that by experience we know have the highest potential for automation, whereas your green boxes are those that have medium potential for automation. And last but not least, the gray boxes is the low potential for automation. It doesn't mean that when you jump into an automation project, you are going to automate processes end to end at the beginning. The end goal and the vision should be, how do I bring enough individual automations into my processes that at the end, my end to end is going to look fully automated. But in order to get there, right, go back to the basics, which is go and look within each one of these dark blue or light green boxes, and don't try to automate it in its entirety. Try to look in very specific tasks and sub-processes where you have the most manual work, the most repetitive work associated with that task and with that sub-process. For example, right, we have processes within HR like managing compensation, right? So it doesn't mean that the bot is going to take smart decisions on how to manage compensation, but what it basically tells you is that once you double click in manage compensation, you're going to be able to look at, for example, how do you update on a yearly basis the compensation, right? And there's a lot of data input that takes place in many different systems and approvals that need to take place. And again, it's how do you find within your managed compensation process those tasks that are very manual, that are very boring for individuals to perform. And that's how you start, identifying highly repetitive, very manual, low exception rates, and that's how you, at the end, figure out a roadmap for automation. Same thing with finance and accounting, right? There are places that are very obvious. How do you pay invoices to suppliers, right? There's always data entry associated with accounts payable processes, right? And that's where bots come into play, right? And again, it's now how you interact with suppliers and how you interact with your internal clients and requesters is a very specific task that takes an invoice, right? Extracts data from an invoice, then manipulates the data in a way that the format is correct and that format is ready to then upload information in your payable system, right? So when you think about automations, you always have to think about three basic elements of the automation. One element that it's dedicated to extract data from a system, or extract data from an email, or extract data from a database, even extracting data from a document, right? From a Word document, PowerPoint, Excel. That's kind of your first steps. The second step, it's what do you do with the data, right? What are the validations that you need to do to the data? What are the exceptions that you need to run through the data? The validation, exceptions, populating the data in a way, or formatting the data in a way that makes sense. And the third step is, where do you want the data to be? It's once you do your data extraction, once you do your data preparation, it's data upload, right? Which system needs to be updated? And even before updating system, is there an approval that needs to take place prior to updating the system? And that's where, from a training perspective in the bot, is that those approvals are clearly coded and identified in your business rules. As I said, right, there are a lot of processes within finance, a lot of processes within accounting that really make sense, and that really, I'd say, quick wins and low-hanging fruits for both attended and unattended automation. And as Phil mentioned, the first good place to start from, and mostly that's what we're seeing in the higher education system, is you try to run your contained pilot for what we call attended automation or desktop automation for one individual, for one very specific process. Then you learn from it, right? Then you learn what worked and didn't work well. And that's how, after running a successful pilot, you can then figure out other places beyond the traditional and quick wins, where it really makes sense to start looking at new process suitability assessments and new opportunities for automation. Information technology, how do you manage tickets, right? So our IT teams, they're always looking after providing service. And how do they know that they need to act upon services? Getting tickets, right? Or getting cases. And they work the cases, they dispatch the cases to the appropriate individual, right? From a technical standpoint. You need to do a lot of testing, right? So there are many pieces, right? And again, it comes down to figuring out the right tasks that make the most sense to be automated, because they are routine-based, they have clear business rules, and they are, done over and over in the same way, in a repetitive way. And that's how you start figuring out where those opportunities are. Benefits, right? So automation comes in many forms and flavors. Again, automation is a journey. Again, you need to start from the very basic, which is your attended. But what are we seeing and what are we hearing from clients and the industry about benefits is cost reduction. It's giving hours back to the business so individuals can focus on higher value, more value-added activities. Scalability is very important. How do you, with the same automation that exists, are able to take on more volumes as volumes grow, and even in specific moments, there's some seasonality associated with your transactional processes. And as Phil mentioned, bots can run overnight. Bots can run 24/7. So scalability of existing processes or your processing capacity, scalability, it's key value added in any given automation. Customer and employee satisfaction. Who likes to be doing the same thing over and over every given day? It's very boring. So automating those very boring and tedious tasks for employees and colleagues, that becomes an employee satisfaction factor. As well as, you know, when you set up and you train your bot in the right way and you train to go through each one of the transactions, then the quality increases, right? So quality, of course, becomes a key factor, and from an internal and external client perspective, having transactions with less errors becomes also a key driver for satisfaction. Efficiency and productivity is very obvious, and also from a compliance standpoint, once your bot is properly trained, even most of the bots that we recommend to produce, they always have some sort of a reporting mechanism. And what I mean with reporting is, once the bot and the automation performs the tasks that has been programmed to do, towards the end of the execution, there's always a report. So, hey, I'm bot number A. These are the transactions that I got. These are the transactions that I was able to process. And these are the ones that were successful. These ones failed, and a reason for the failure. So this last piece of the bot being able to communicate back to the user, back to the internal client, informing and providing daily information about the processing capacity and cases that were successful, cases that could not be processed due to a business rule that was not met. That's something that it's always that's always included as part of the end-to-end automation or the end-to-end processing of the bot. And that becomes at the end, right? When you have these type of reports that are repeatedly provided on a daily basis to users, a control mechanism to figure out whether the bot needs to be retrained or whether a business rule that we thought it was clear, it is not clear for the bot. Now I'm gonna jump, and I'm not gonna go very specific in terms of the use cases, since we have Janet. Janet is gonna talk a little bit about the Berkeley use cases, but think about it, right? In the higher education, admissions, financial aid reporting, the workflows for shipping, the processing of university gifts, from a reporting standpoint, federal work studies, the registration processing, scheduling, grants administration, facilities administration. So when you start thinking about all those processes that are core processes to higher education, but are also very labor intensive, that you can clearly define business rules, that exceptions are a few, that electronic data is available, this process is listed here, then you start figuring out and finding the right candidates for automation and to start your RPA journey. Other use cases, right, across many universities and many higher education systems, billing and invoicing is very obvious, right? Bots can do a lot of work, a lot of the manual work that is being done in the billing and in the invoicing. The manual tasks associated with not the recruitment process in its entirety, but figuring out within recruitment what are those pieces where it's just a matter of moving data from one place to another, right? Updating systems. Bots are great at updating systems. Installing software, right? Having automated bots running in the back to continuously upgrade software for students and the faculty. Quality audits, spend categorization from a procurement standpoint, perfect place for a bot to do and run reports, appointments, customer setup, and the automation of curricula. So when you look across all of the key processes in the higher education, all of them are subject to automation. And as I mentioned before, it's not about going crazy and try to automate just for the sake of it. It's figuring out within your processes what are the set of tasks that really make the most sense for automation. And then I'm going to stop here. I'm going to make a pause, right?
We
Because
Chuy,
Yeah.
just quickly, this is Phil. We actually have a lot of other examples. So Chuy's just touched on a few, and we're going to have a case study from Janet in a second. But we actually got lots of other examples of real use case studies in university system. We've actually got it as an appendix to this deck. So if anybody's interested in that, we can provide that later. So as you look to sell your program internally, you can refer to these other examples across multiple different universities and university systems and across functions and processes. So we can provide that later on as well. So, Chuy, sorry, back to you.
No, that's a good point, Phil. We have a lot of use cases within higher education. They're going to be part of the presentation, the deck at the end. But I wanted, Phil, just to make a pause here. See, you and I spoke already for almost half an hour, and I just wanted to see if there's any question from the audience at this point.
Yeah, so there's one question. I'll ask you this first, Chuy, and then I can add my own comments. But actually, and I've heard this question a lot from other organizations over the years, but is there a sort of, the question is specific, I'll read it as worded. Is there a rule of thumb on a volume level after which investing in RPA makes sense? In other words, what sort of scale is required? Do you need scale, or can you do it point blank, sort of point in time, I should say, not point. Is there a rule of thumb around when it becomes viable from an ROI perspective?
Yeah, I think the rule of thumb, right? And when you think about volume, you need to think about time spent to processing one transaction. So you always keep in mind my number of transactions and the time per transaction, right? Because using those two elements is going to give you the total time that the bot is aiming to save. Rule of thumb, right? Rule of thumb, anywhere between 20 and above hours saved in a month, it's going to make a business case. That's a higher education statement in the United States. Any given transaction that requires in a month 20 or more hours, it's going to have a business case for you. It's going to have ROI.
Yeah, and thanks, Chuy. And just to expand on that for a second, I mean, the great thing about RPA is it can be done sort of just specific activities within a process, within an end-to-end process. So actually, it can be done on a small scale, or it can be done on a very large scale, right? And so you can actually look at opportunities within end-to-end processes. The one thing we often say is that RPA isn't about automating end-to-end processes. It's about enabling automation along end-to-end processes. You see what I'm saying? So there's a lot of human interaction between systems and ERPs and programs. And a lot of that is manual, human activity, right? There's a lot of downloading reports and analyzing data from systems. So what RPA does, it takes those components of manual processes and automates them in line with your automation. It's not about replacing ERP, it's about enabling. And because of the nature of that, they can be really easy implemented, fast, high ROI, because you can measure it to Chuy's point in hours saved very quickly, and then you can do an ROI. Now, clearly you can do broader programs, and there are some organizations that have, thousands of bots in play. But then you get into the whole structure of how to run a program, which Chuy will talk about later. So the rule of thumb is the hours, 20 hours that Chuy talked about on an individual bot. But the other thing I would say is RPA, return from RPA, you can usually implement within 6 weeks. I mean, it might take longer for the initial politics and setup, but usually within 6 weeks. So the high ROI, so it's breaking the traditional way of thinking about technology enablement, because the return can be fast. I will take the opportunity just to remind everyone there is a Q&A, so if you have any questions, you can please type them in. I will be watching that while Janet and Chuy continue to present, and I'll bring these questions up as they are. So please ask questions as we go. With that, Chuy, I'll hand back to you to introduce Janet.
Yeah, so we're very happy to interact with Janet again. Janet glad to have you here, and thanks a lot, right, for taking the opportunity to share your success cases with the audience. So I'm gonna turn it over to you, and I'm gonna thank you again.
All right, great, thanks, and love working with you guys. So you can go ahead to the next slide. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a background on our journey in starting with RPA, building on some of the things that Phil and Chuy had brought up earlier. When we were first really trying to take a look at RPA, what we did was we actually went out to our transactional processors. So I'm working the HR space. We were looking really at things related to how could we help transactional processors be able to do more value added services. So to the point that Phil was bringing up earlier, we were looking at RPA not as a cost savings. We really were looking at giving those hours back to the business so that people could focus on higher value work. And so what we did was we went out to our transactional processors and we said, hey, what stuff is boring? What do you not like to do? What is repetitive? And they gave us a laundry list of things that they were ready to say, let's automate these things. We worked with them with Chasey Partners to help us assess what would be the best ones to go after. And we made the decision to automate first our true new hires. So these are people who were being hired onto our system. We wanted to eliminate the data entry that people had to do from a DocuSign packet into the UCPath system. We wanted to automate that. We knew that if we could do that, we could save anywhere between 20 to 30 minutes per transaction, because those are just very time intensive transactions to process. And we knew we would get better quality because we would avoid, simple data entry errors and transposing from a DocuSign packet into the system. When we made the decision that that was the process that we were going to go after, we had to enable the software. And we had a number of challenges with our IT department in just getting them to agree that we could even have an RPA software license. They were very much oriented towards wanting to keep us in that sort of first tier where it was desktop attended RPA. So our people would actually have to execute the bot because they were not really interested in having bots run automatically in the background. They were very concerned about the risks and security involved in that. Now, of course, that we've been doing this for a couple of years, they're really realizing that they're not really taking advantage of RPA as much as they could if we had unattended RPA. And we are pursuing that now as we have shown various successes with RPA in our current environment. So when we made the decision to go ahead and do our first bot, we decided to do a few things from a change management perspective. One is we name our bots. So then that way they have a little bit more of a personal kind of touch. People realize that the cow bot is going to be doing the new hires, where the OSCE bot is going to be doing concurrent hires. So we name our bots to help with the change management. Our folks really actually like that. It made it a little bit more personal for them. So if you want to flip to the next slide, what I'll talk to you about is our very first bot, which is, as I said, our new hire templates from a DocuSign packet. Originally, this particular process would take anywhere between 45 minutes to an hour to download the packets, to render the packets, to go into the systems, to update all the information, and then submit the templates. We do about 1,600, hires in a month. So we did have a lot of volume, and we knew that there was going to be a great time savings if we were able to automate and eliminate that duplicate data entry. So with the help of Chasey Partners, it took about 12 weeks because, as Chuy mentioned, we had a lot of process work that we had to do in order to tighten up our process to make sure that it would really work with the automation. So it did take us a little bit of time, in addition to, of course, having to work with IT to try to get things set up. And when we've actually implemented this, we went from taking about, let's say, 45 minutes per transaction down to under 2 minutes per transaction. So over the course of just the 1 month where we ran this particular pilot, we actually saved 358 man hours of time, which was a huge savings. And again, we have been working with this bot now for a couple of years. We've tweaked the bot and made things even better so that now when the bot runs, it takes about 58 seconds for the entire transaction to be completed. So we're really running these in under a minute. Which is again a big savings, time savings for our people. And again, we don't really have errors now. Chuy mentioned that the outputs that you receive do indicate when there are errors that have failed for various business rules. But frankly, we don't really have those errors now because we're not having people key information incorrectly, and we've set the automation so that things can flow smoothly. And it has increased our accuracy tremendously. So with this particular bot, we were like, yeah, this is great. We want more of this. How could we make it happen? So if you go to the next slide, Chuy, what we did was we decided to automate the concurrent hire process for our faculty who work over the summers. So as I'm sure you're all aware in our space, when our faculty members choose to take a position where they're working over the summer, that's additional compensation. It's an additional appointment that we need to process. And so again, we have maybe 600 to 700 of these in June that we need to process to set ourselves up for the rest of the summer. And again, these transactions would take about 20 minutes per transaction for an individual to do this. When we implemented this bot, it took us about 4 weeks. So we went from 12 weeks to 4 weeks because we were much more familiar with how to actually implement automation. And we were able to tighten the process up a lot faster. And now we are running this. We ran it in June for our summer hires. We ran it overnight so that we could, again, not have to tie up our people's credentials during the day. And we were able to take advantage of systems availability during the evening. And we were able to process all 600 of our faculty new hires or concurrent hires in less than 5 hours. So they were taking well under a minute to process. So that was, again, a huge win because we set it off at night and then we came in the next morning and it was all done. And we loved that. And so we were like, how can we then leverage this even more? So we then created our third bot. So if you want to hit the next slide, Chuy. Our third bot was to do the concurrent hires for summer sessions. So again, as many people know, during the summer, we have our summer sessions where we hire a ton of lecturers just for the summer. They're concurrent hires. We do this work. Again, it was a fairly simple transaction to begin with, only took about 5 minutes to do this transaction. But when we implemented this bot, we were able to do it in 7 days. So from the time that we reached out to Chazy to say, we want this bot to the time that it went live in production was literally 1 week. And we are now processing our summer session concurrent hires, or I should say we have been processing them over the summer, and each transaction runs at about 46 seconds. So we are doing less than a minute for each of those transactions. And it's wonderful because we don't have to, waste time. And again, the accuracy is very high on those particular transactions. Excuse me. So now those are the bots that we implemented within, again, fairly short time, the first couple of months. Subsequently, we have tweaked our bots so that we are able to have these bots even work more efficiently. We have implemented a number of other bots in other areas. We are looking in funding entry, so we're leaking into the finance areas. We're doing a lot of communication. So our human resources department is now using bots to create emails to send out to new hires about the perks that they get coming onto Berkeley. We are doing it to engage, various employee engagement communications are going out via bots. So we are really leveraging these, again, to Phil and Chuy's point earlier, to take a simple step, one step in an end-to-end process that then is ripe for automation. Can we automate that simple step so that we don't have to deal with it anymore? And then we can move on to the next one and the next one and the next one. So we're really looking to grow these functionality. And we are also now looking to bring on enterprise solutions as opposed to desktop solutions, because our IT department is becoming more familiar with the software and its capabilities, and are starting to see how it can benefit groups outside of just the HR and finance space, and actually how it might be able to help them in IT. So we're very excited, and we'll continue to be working with Chase partners as we implement more RPA bots in the future. So Chuy, I don't know if there was any questions that people had, but I'm happy to answer any questions. And
if you're just a quick question before Chuy takes it from there,
sure.
Janet. So you mentioned IT right at the end there. So the question is, how did you work with your IT department on this, and was there some initial pushback at all?
Yeah, so the first thing that we did was we reached out to IT to basically just say, hey, can we get a license installed on our desktop? That led to two areas. One, it led to our group that works with licensing and, installing applications on people's desktops. But it really sent us to the IT security office, because they were there was not a lot of knowledge about what RPA does in our IT security area. And when they started to hear about the concept of a bot going into, for example, the UC Path system to input data, they were very concerned because that bot doesn't have credentials. How would they know what this bot should and shouldn't do? So their initial working with us in collaboration set the stage to say, you will have to have your users log into applications first and then set the bot off to do the actual activity. But we will not assign credentials to bots. We want them associated with humans. And that was, again, it didn't give us the win we were looking for, because we were looking to be able to take those people and redeploy them to do other things while the bot was running. And so that's why we shifted to doing things in the evening, so that they could, use their credentials during the day for their other activities. But then as IT became more familiar with it, what they realized was that, well, the people that we have logging into all these applications are our super users, and they have very wide permissions. And that, wouldn't it make more sense to create an ID number for a bot that has very restricted permissions, so that if for some reason there is a compromise, the bot cannot do anything other than its very restricted permissions. And so we are now working with our UC Path team to create what they're calling robotic IDs, so that we can actually associate a specific robot with a robotic ID, so that we can restrict the permissions of the bot to just the activities that the bot needs to perform. And that actually is a better model for IT, and they're much happier with that. And so now they're collaborating with us on how we can make that happen. So that's been a big win, but it's been a several-year journey of working with them to have them understand and educate them about how it works, and so that we could mitigate risk for the organization.
That's actually a really good story there, Janet. And I hadn't heard you say that before, but because the IT journey you talked about, we've been talking about for a while, and that's really good, because that example of that profile for a bot within security is a really good outcome from that, and it can be leveraged elsewhere, because you're actually improving security, not reducing security by doing that. So that's a really, really good story. I know we could talk for hours, like we have done so many times, Janet, about this stuff. I mean, the other thing that makes me think about is the old, comments that why can't we just do this as a macro or a script, and why RPA is different to that. But I won't go into that now, because I know that Chuy wants to take it from here. If any more questions come up, though, Janet, I will. I'll ask them at the end. So Chuy, thanks again, Janet. So Chuy, back to you.
Thanks, Janet. Right, and a great success story. It's exactly what I was kind of highlighting in my opening remarks. RPA and automation is all about the journey. It's not about how do you get started. How do you figure out what are the right set of tasks or steps to be automated, and how you've been able to grow, Janet. And you mentioned a key important point, right? Bots need to be improved and changed through time just so they keep adding more processing capacity. And you mentioned it, right? It's you came to a point where one of your bots, it's down to 0 errors, right? So that's just amazing. Congratulations for that. So at Chasey, when we look at RPA, we don't think about development, right? And development of a bot is just a small portion of your automation program. Furthermore, developing an automation from a code perspective, right? It's not as complex as it would look like. Most of the RPA platforms and softwares are low code, right? So what we're experiencing, right, is that many of the automations, once the basic code is created, a business user or a super user, it's able to monitor and control them. So the level of involvement that you need from IT once the bot is up and running, it's minimal. When you look at your automation programs, you always have to look at it from an end-to-end perspective. So it all starts with process. So process suitability, it's key, right? How do you set up a project where you are going to look after, let's say, right, finance? Look at finance. Go and look to your accounts payable, accounts receivable, and accounting. Figure out within those processes what are the best candidates, and run individual diagnostic for each one of the candidates. So looking at a spectrum of processes and looking at individual use cases, and then qualifying those use cases so you can come up with a priority list. And that's what a business case is, right? Looking at the process, quantifying the process, looking after the viability or feasibility of each individual potential case, and then aggregating the potential cases in a form of business case, and you compare the business case with the level of investment in terms of licensing and in terms of development effort. When you are having a hard time getting started and you don't know where to look at, it's proof of concept, right? Or productive pilot. After you select a quick win or a candidate that has been identified as the best opportunity, why don't you prove it, right? And proving it, it's not just running dummy data through the automation or through the bot. It's actually creating a bot that you can create documentation for it, develop the bot, deploy the bot into production, and then monitor the bot in production so you can clearly see the benefits associated with it. So pilots and proof of concept are a mechanism to gain credibility from IT and from others in the business. When automations start to grow, and I think that's one of the phases that Janet is going through, once you want to scale, right, a center of excellence becomes a must. And center of excellence are a governed body that is going to control the end life cycle time of any given automation. Both development is important, right? How do you create the right set of standards and procedures and best practices embedded in your automation system, so you can reutilize assets as you continue to grow your automation program. And at the end, bots break, right? So bots in production, they fail. If there's any upgrade in any given system that the bot is interacting with, most likely you are going to need to do small tweaks here and there to the bot, so the bot is again up and running in a normal way. I just mentioned our process suitability has different steps, but it comes down to running individual diagnostics to each one of the candidates, evaluating the viability of each one of the candidates, identifying transactionality, which is the two factors that I just mentioned, how much time is taking for an individual to process a transaction, and what is the volume associated with that transaction, what is the potential qualitative benefits in terms of employee and stakeholder satisfaction. And once you have your viability, your quantitative benefits, your qualitative benefits, we do have an algorithm that bakes all of these factors together and gives you a priority list. So what it basically gives you, it's a rating for each one of the candidates for automation. And in aggregate, just by sorting the potential candidates from the highest rating to the lowest rating, and then associating a financial benefit to it, you can come in and aggregate with a business case that you can bring forward to the business and get the right approvals. I just mentioned the benefits of pilots and proof of concept, super important. How do you gain credibility with the business and with IT? It's running a pilot that you can deploy into production, monitor, and then show how it really works in production. Scaling, right? Important to have a center of excellence. You need to have a central governed body that is going to be able to manage end-to-end from discovery through build and manage. How do you engage with other organizations and the business so you can get more ideas and you can evaluate the ideas and you can continue to grow automations? And measuring, right? It's very important, and this is kind of a best practice that we're recommending to many of our higher education clients, is always try to think about a business intelligence layer on the top of automations, so you can figure out automations that are working, not working, but also being able to measure real time the benefits associated with each one of the automations. Agile, right? So Phil mentioned about this, but it is important that you take away this message. Low complexity automations can be done in less than a month. So different to the traditional IT projects.
Chuy, sorry, I just a couple of questions coming through, and I know we're running short of time, so I'll ask them now, and then you put them into your answers, or ask Janet. So 2 questions. Firstly was, can RPA interfaces support web accessibility requirements? In other words, how does RPA work in the web interface space? And the second question is, if we can just ask Janet a little bit more about how has it benefited from a user experience perspective, rather than, I should say, in addition to the improvement in processing times, from a user perspective, how has it benefited the university so far? So those are 2 questions. I'm going to leave you to work out how to fit them in the next 7 minutes.
Yeah, and we were about to finish the charts, Phil. So yeah, that was the perfect timing to interrupt. The perfect timing to talk about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, is the question about whether the bot can interact with web interfaces?
Yeah, how it does it in simple terms. Yeah.
Very straightforward, right? Any electronic system, in the case web systems, it's bot friendly, right? So when you think about where the bot struggles with, it's when you have unstructured data sitting probably in an unstructured PDF or even a picture and grabbing information from that picture or unstructured document. Whereas if you are accessing a web system, right, the bot can use credentials to access the web system, right? The bot can grab information from the web page. The bot can upload information to the web page. So web interfaces are a perfect match and a perfect fit for a bot. And since we have just 5 minutes, Janet, do you want to take on that question and then I'll just wrap up? What was the question?
Sure. I was actually just going to try to type in the chat too. But yeah, to be honest with you, our users love it. Because we specifically went out to them and said, what is it about your job that's the boring stuff that you wish you could get rid of? And those are the things that we focused on. So, Chuy mentioned that, we went through the Chasey partners where they did that algorithm and sort of gave us the priorities, but our team chose something different because they wanted to choose something that they were going to get a benefit from. And that's why we went with our new hires. And they were very invested then in doing the hard work that needed to be done to bring it to fruition. And then once they got it and they were like, yeah, this thing is awesome. What more can we do? And so they were very excited about it. They control it. They run it themselves. they picked the thing that they wanted to do. As I said, we softened it by, instead of calling them bots, we actually name them. So people are like, yeah, let's get Cal to do that, or let's get Oski to do that. And those are the little changes that we made, and that made it very positive for the users. And they're now the ones saying, hey, can we automate this? Or hey, can we automate that? So they're now generating their own ideas about things that they can automate in their world to make it better for themselves. So it's great.
Thanks a lot, Janet.
Thanks, Janet. Thanks, Janet. So, I mean, as I said, there's so much we can discuss, and we have discussed with you guys at UC Berkeley. There's so many different. Whenever we talk about RPA with university or with any organization, they're always correctly. How does the user experience this? How does the provider use it? How do you interface with IT? How does it work with your existing systems? Is it automated versus unautomated desktop automation? So these are all great questions that we could spend the entire day doing it. And the experience at UC Berkeley is not a microcosm, sort of a great example of how that would work in practice, because we were with you guys at the early stages of those discussions. You started to build it and you're starting to scale. And as Chuy said, it's very about the COE element of that scale going forward. So it's, again, thanks, Janet, very much for your experiences and your insights. It's been fantastic. So Chuy, I'm going to let you finish up. We've got a couple of minutes, and I know there's one pillar left, so I'll let you finish it up.
Yeah, it was just the last chart, Phil, which is don't forget about bots in production, right? Bots break, bots need monitoring, bots need maintenance and support. So just keep in mind as you're trying to build your end-to-end program that having a team or a practice or a third party looking after bots in production is critical for success. As we mentioned, right, we have a lot of use cases in the appendix, and feel free to read them at your leisure, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions to us. Again, I'm gonna just give a couple of words, and then I'm gonna turn it over to you, Phil. It's, RPA is all about a journey. RPA, higher education, it's how do you pick the right place to start from, right? And that's your pilot, that's your proof of concept. You are going to need to go through, a lot of hurdles with IT and getting the right approvals, but you need to start somewhere, right? So RPA it is a great solution to prove value to the business, quick ROI in just a few weeks.
Absolutely, and as I just mentioned, actually, I mentioned not just at the start. I mean, it's part of a broader suite of hyper automation and digitalization, which is a fantastic opportunity, which all businesses are looking at. One little quite short story I say is when I first heard about RPA, it was probably about 6 or 7 years ago now, and I thought, oh, is this just another technology fad and a bit of marketing by the by the providers? And the truth is, no, it's not. It's actually a great additional enabler alongside your existing technologies. It's also about enabling the user. You may have heard about this sort of ability to manage the citizen developers, I think is the expression. You may have heard about that. And in a university environment, wow, why can't we do that? And from a student perspective, wow, why can't we do that? And now RPA and digital automation is part of the curriculum at a number of universities, and it's part of the training programs. And I know, like the UiPath are working with universities to do that. So this is part of a broader hyper-automation trend, but RPA is the real element of hyper-automation that is scaling. It's really scaling now, and it will develop. And so we think it's a great opportunity for higher education. Hopefully the case study today has been a great example of that. And I just say thank you all for joining today. Hope you enjoy the rest of the CHEC conference, which is a fantastic conference, as I've been going to it for many years. It's a great example of collaboration, and we are, as I said earlier on, we're delighted and privileged to be part of that. So thank you very much for your team. Thanks, Janet. Thanks, Chuy, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.